The Victorian Premier has apologised to the family of an Indigenous woman who died in custody back in 2020, confirming work is underway to reform bail laws. Our political reporter in Victoria, Simon Love, is at State Parliament. Simon, what has Daniel Andrews had to say on this case?
Well, Kieran, the Premier has given the strongest indication yet that Victoria's bail laws will be changed, potentially relaxed within the next few months, with both major parties now supporting reform amid strong calls from the state's coroner. Now, it follows the death in custody of Indigenous woman Veronica Nelson. She died after spending 3 days in Melbourne's Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, a maximum security women's prison. Now, the coroner, Simon McGregor, yesterday found that the treatment and assessment of Ms Nelson was inadequate and that the use of handcuffs had violated her human rights. The coroner yesterday also went on to say that the bail laws in Victoria had a disproportionate effect on First Nations people, incarcerating mostly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women for minor offences. So here's what the Premier had to say today on the case.
And her experience and the terrible way in which she was let down and failed will drive reform and change. Veronica Nelson should be alive today. She's not. For that, we are truly sorry.
Daniel Andrews said the changes to the law will be a reckoning to those who did the wrong thing in this case. He did single out that specific exemptions that apply for Indigenous people should have been applied in this case. The Premier also praised the Liberal Party for indicating this morning that it would back any changes to the Bail Act. So here was Daniel Andrews and John Pesciuto on that.
Great to see that there is, it seems, a very real bipartisanship in terms of improving and updating them and making sure that they are fit for purpose. Of course, the opposition will reserve its right to look at details of any changes. That's perfectly appropriate.
We're back in Parliament next week, and there's no reason why we can't begin the early steps of addressing the problems that led to this tragic loss of life. There are a number of statutory recommendations that the coroner has made, which the government could begin immediate work on in drafting.
And Simon, the government is under fire for spending and backlogs in the justice and emergency services sector.
Specifically when it comes to the justice system, it's that criminal court case backlog that the report on government services by the Productivity Commission found that Victoria's got the longest court backlog. The government insists that it's doing all it can to try and reduce that backlog, though blaming the pandemic for that long list. The other thing that the government's come under fire for is its high amount of spending on firefighting services. If we take a look at what the Productivity Commission found and the comparison around the country, Victoria has been spending $500 million more than New South Wales and more than double that on what Queensland spends on firefighting services. So Victoria's spending $2.1 billion, arguing that the services here are the fastest in the nation and that they're required because of regions with major differences in geography. Here was the opposition leader and Premier on that.
We don't want training compromised or asset acquisition compromised. We need our fire services to be strong. And so Victorians will have a number of questions today about why it's costing us so much more for a service that's running deeply in deficit.
I'm not certain how they've calculated that or whether there's fair comparisons been made, by which I mean apples and apples. We're certainly not going to apologise for investing in the safety of every single Victorian.
And Kieran, you can expect these issues to be a key feature when Parliament returns for 2023 here at Spring Street next week.
Will be interesting viewing. Thanks, Simon.